I'm gonna make this very simple for you, Dan. Men should not play sports against women. I'm not gonna get into all the bullshit that's going on out here in the world today.
Biological men should not be competing against biological girls in sports. Period.
The WNBA wrote those rules, and he just finessed them.
The WNBA has practically torn itself apart from within, and the league may have created this problem on its own. In its effort to promote inclusion, it has avoided clearly defining what qualifies someone as a woman under its rules, opening the door for anyone who identifies as one to potentially compete. Enie's Freedom decided to challenge that policy directly by submitting paperwork to enter the Women's League, using the WNBA's own rules to force a response. Now the league is stuck in a difficult position. Saying no could undermine its own inclusion policies, while saying yes could make the league a worldwide laughingstock. But the situation became even more intense when NBA legends began speaking out and criticizing the league. Shaq, Barkley, Pippen, and others have all taken shots, and if you thought Charles Barkley and Stephen A. Smith were tough enough, wait until you hear what MJ had to say. The league has reached a point where people are seriously debating whether men should be allowed to compete in women's sports. Imagine prime Shaq wearing a WNBA jersey and stepping onto the court against women. Somehow, that is the argument the league now has to confront. But this situation did not begin with Enie's Freedom. Sophie Cunningham had already spoken about protecting women's sports, and she faced immediate backlash online, followed by an elbow to the face from Dajanai Carrington. The WNBA remained largely silent, and that was reportedly the moment Enie's Freedom lost patience. After being blacklisted since 2022 because of his protest against China, he decided to read through the entire 400-page WNBA rulebook. What he found caught his attention. The rules stated that only women could play, yet nowhere in those hundreds of pages was the term woman actually defined. He had even posted in 2023 asking whether he should simply wear a wig and play if anyone could identify as a woman. Millions saw the post before he deleted it, but the league still made no major change. Then, on August 7th, he submitted the paperwork under the hashtag #LetFreedomPlay. Royce White posted a wig photo, Larry Sanders went live on Instagram and declared for the draft, and suddenly the league faced a serious dilemma created by its own policies. Then the NBA legends began weighing in. Charles Barkley, in particular, made his position very clear. He had been speaking about this issue for years before Enie's Freedom brought it back into the spotlight, but much of the mainstream media ignored his comments. Barkley later appeared on Outkick with Dan Dakich and directly said that men should not compete against women in sports, adding that anyone who believes men belong on the court against women is simply stupid. And personally, I agree with him.
I'm gonna make this very simple for you, Dan. Men should not play sports against women. I'm not gonna get into all the bullshit that's going on out here in the world today.
But when Sophie Cunningham stepped forward and expressed the same view, it was suddenly treated like a major controversy. Chuck watched the entire situation unfold, then appeared on the Andy Basher podcast and said he genuinely feels sorry for people today because it seems impossible to say anything ordinary without facing backlash. He explained that saying a man should not compete against a woman in sports should not even be considered controversial.
I feel so bad for people today, like, you can't say anything. I'm like, that shouldn't even be controversial that we should say a man should play a sport against a woman.
He said he genuinely feels sorry for Sophie Cunningham, a professional athlete who was elbowed in the face and then targeted online simply for expressing what she believed was common sense. What makes Barkley's reaction so fitting is that Chuck has never been someone who hides his opinions to make people comfortable. He has criticized LeBron, challenged the media, and even called out entire franchises on live television without hesitation. So when Enie filed the paperwork and the WNBA dismissed it as a bad faith move, Barkley saw the bigger issue immediately, a league being challenged by the very rules it created. A statement from Barkley on ESPN's Inside the NBA was later reported, with his message essentially being that he had warned about this issue for years. Enie did not create the problem, and the WNBA had created a situation that exposed its own hypocrisy. The interesting part is that the WNBA still has not directly responded to Barkley, because what could the league realistically say? That Chuck is wrong? That Sophie is wrong? That everyone raising the same concern is wrong? The league appears to have little more than meetings and discussions to fall back on. But if you thought Barkley was the toughest voice in this conversation, Paul Pierce had not even spoken yet. Paul Pierce is not exactly the first person you would expect to comment on WNBA corporate politics, but once you understand his background, his reaction makes more sense. Pierce built his career around proving doubters wrong and refusing to stay down when people counted him out. He was stabbed 11 times in a Boston nightclub in 2000, returned to play all 82 games that season, won an NBA championship 8 years later, and spent his career answering his critics on the court. So when he looks at Eni's freedom, a man who was blacklisted by a league after speaking his mind, stayed away for years, and then returned by using the league's own rules against it, Pierce can recognize that mentality immediately. In a different form, it mirrors much of his own story. Pierce also understands how large organizations react when their own decisions come back to challenge them. The WNBA had years between Eni's comments in 2023 and his official filing in 2026 to clarify its rules and clearly define what qualifies as a woman. Instead, the league chose not to make that change, and Pierce was not impressed. During one of his appearances on KG's podcast, he compared the situation to using a cheat code, pointing out that the league had years to address the issue after Eni raised it and chose not to. But Pierce talking about cheat codes is nothing compared with what Shaq had to say, especially because Shaquille O'Neal has a direct business interest in the WNBA's future. Shaq is not simply another retired legend watching from the sidelines. He has a major role with Reebok's basketball division and has been involved in efforts connected to WNBA compensation, meaning the league's future could have a real impact on the basketball business he is helping build. So when Eni's Freedom submitted the paperwork and the league started looking increasingly ridiculous, Shaq was not simply watching as a fan. He was watching as someone with business interests connected to the league's credibility. That is what makes his position so complicated. On one side, Shaq wants the WNBA to succeed, but on the other, he understands that the league has serious problems that need to be addressed. Seeing the WNBA get challenged by its own rulebook while he is trying to help strengthen its commercial future has to be frustrating. When he spoke about the situation on his podcast, people were waiting to hear his thoughts, and his comments revealed exactly where he stood. He explained that he invested in the WNBA because he believes in it, but also pointed out that something meaningful cannot be built on a weak foundation. His message was simple: the WNBA created the rules, and Eni only used those rules against them. The conversation quickly spread online, with fans joking that Eni would score 50 points and grab 20 rebounds every night if he entered the WNBA. Donald Trump Jr. also jokingly predicted that Eni would break the league's records during his first season. Eni himself went even further, claiming he would average 60 points and 30 rebounds. The WNBA's single-game scoring record is 53 points, so a prediction of 60 would obviously attract attention. Shaq understands that these numbers are not entirely meaningless because he knows how different the competition could look if this situation actually happened. But while Shaq may have mixed feelings about the issue, KG has no such hesitation. KG does not overcomplicate things, avoid difficult topics, or waste time with endless task force discussions. He looks at the situation, identifies what he believes is obvious, and says it directly. According to KG, the basic issue is that men are biologically stronger than women. That was the point he made on his podcast, arguing that this simple biological difference should not be ignored. His argument is that nobody is trying to control the league. The discussion is about a biological reality that the WNBA did not clearly address in its lengthy rulebook. The league found space for countless basketball regulations, yet failed to clearly address this fundamental issue. What makes KG's position more interesting is that he genuinely respects women's basketball and has praised Diana Taurasi as one of the greatest players ever. He is not dismissing the WNBA or the athletes. Instead, he believes the league's leadership is damaging a sport that deserves respect. While KG keeps his argument straightforward, Larry Bird brings a much more personal connection to the situation because it is happening in Indiana. Bird is deeply connected to the state after spending years with the Pacers organization, and the Indiana Fever is now at the center of the controversy. Sophie Cunningham plays for the Fever, meaning the protests, physical incidents, and online arguments have all unfolded in territory closely connected to Bird. His reaction also carries extra weight because Bird has never been afraid to speak his mind. He is one of the most famous trash talkers in NBA history, someone who could tell an opponent exactly what he planned to do and then back it up on the court. Watching the WNBA describe a legal challenge as bad faith while Sophie Cunningham faced backlash for expressing her opinion clearly did not sit well with him. When Bird was asked about the situation during an ESPN interview, he reportedly defended Sophie and said she spoke up about what needed to be said and then faced consequences for it. Then he simply turned their own rule book back on them. I have no issue with that. The bigger question is why we are even debating men competing in women's sports in the first place. That is the question the WNBA front office should be losing sleep over, because millions of people are asking it and the league still has not provided a clear answer. But while Bird kept things direct, Scottie Pippen turned the entire situation into a lesson in strategy. Pippen spent 11 years operating within Phil Jackson's triangle offense, and that system was built around staying patient, avoiding unnecessary pressure, and allowing the defense to create its own weaknesses. Find the opening, stay composed, and attack when the opportunity appears. That is exactly what Eni did. When Pippen heard about the situation, he reportedly understood the strategy immediately. According to reports, he compared it to Phil Jackson's philosophy of letting an opponent's defense defeat itself. Eni did not need to attack the WNBA directly, he simply allowed its own policy to create the problem. Pippen understood that approach because he also knows what it feels like to deal with a front office that failed to properly value its own star players. So when he saw the WNBA leave a major gap in its rulebook, ignore the issue for years, and then act shocked when someone eventually used that opening in 2026, he was not going to pretend nothing happened. And while Pippen's comments about patience were interesting, they were nothing compared with what Michael Jordan had to say. Before getting into Jordan's response, it is important to remember that Eni had criticized MJ publicly in the past, while Jordan had remained quiet. That makes his decision to comment now even more notable. Anyone familiar with Jordan knows that when he chooses to speak publicly about something, he usually considers it important. His entire career was built around identifying weaknesses and exploiting them until his opponent had no answer. The bad boys tried to intimidate him physically, and he continued finding ways to win. So when Eni discovered a missing definition and used the league's own rules to challenge it, Jordan's response reportedly focused on the loophole itself. His team released a statement, and the most interesting part was the idea that Eni had found an opening in the rules and used it. That is not simply a stunt, it is a strategic move. The WNBA left the door open, so Eni walked through it. He had already lost his career opportunities for speaking his mind, so he had little reason to play along with the league's expectations. While Jordan approached the situation like a chess match, Isaiah Thomas offered another perspective. Thomas became famous for understanding how to operate within the limits of the rulebook, especially during Detroit's Bad Boys era. That team pushed the boundaries of physical play while staying within what officials allowed, turning the rules themselves into part of their strategy. So when Isaiah saw Eni identify a major gap in a lengthy rulebook, he immediately recognized the tactic. His reaction was different because he had already warned that controversy can bring attention to a league. When Caitlin Clark became a major star, Thomas pointed out that controversy may be negative, but it also attracts viewers. He understood that unresolved issues could eventually become a serious problem for the league, even if he never expected it to unfold this way. Then, a few weeks ago, he posted about his Detroit days and explained that they exploited every gray area the rules gave them, but he never expected that same approach to be used in a situation involving men competing in women's sports. Coming from someone who built an era around finding those gray areas, the comment felt less like an attack and more like an acknowledgement of the strategy. But nobody expected Gilbert Arenas to have one of the most awkward reactions of all. Every other legend in this discussion was reacting to Eni's decision to declare for the WNBA, but Gilbert had something even more uncomfortable to address: his own past comments. Back in 2023, when Eni joked about wearing a wig and challenging the league's rules, Gil appeared on camera and immediately shut the conversation down. He said,
But what I'm saying is, in women's sports, like if you're a woman soccer player and you're actually a woman and you want to be considered a him or a he, technically by the rules that they...
Then he followed up by saying, "We are not having no Joanna Man," delivering it like the whole idea was completely ridiculous. For anyone unfamiliar with the reference, Joanna Man was a 2002 comedy about a man who gets banned from the league, puts on a wig, and joins a women's basketball team. Hollywood treated the concept as pure comedy because it seemed too unrealistic to ever happen. Gil basically looked at the movie and said, "Relax. This is fiction. This cannot happen in real life." But that statement aged badly because years later, the situation started looking surprisingly similar to the movie. 3 former NBA players ended up discussing the possibility in the same week, turning what was once a punchline into a real controversy. A few days later, Gil returned to his podcast and admitted that he had been wrong. He openly acknowledged that he had confidently said Joanna Man would never happen, but now had to stand corrected because the WNBA situation had made the idea possible. The fact that Gil had to take back his own prediction became one of the funniest moments in basketball commentary in years. But as entertaining as the situation was, Stephen A. Smith wanted people to understand that there was a much more serious issue underneath it, and it was something the WNBA had been avoiding. Stephen A. had already raised concerns similar to Eni's before the situation became a major story. He even appeared on Bill Maher's show and made the argument directly.
Biological men should not be competing against biological girls in sports. Period. Period.
By 2025, he was pushing the argument even further, saying that when transgender athletes, particularly men, compete in women's sports, the issue is not simply about rights but about protecting the rights of female athletes. He also questioned the Leah Thomas situation, asking whether it really takes an expert to notice something unusual about a swimmer moving from 462nd as a man to first in the country as a woman. More recently, during an ESPN segment, Kendrick Perkins asked him about the situation, and Stephen A. repeated the position he had already expressed before Eni brought the issue into the spotlight. Biological men should not compete against women in sports. The WNBA created a rulebook that, according to this argument, failed to clearly address that distinction, and now the league is being challenged over the gap in its policies.